Hi, I'm BJ, and this is the Arcane Alienist Podcast. Hey everybody, today I've got, on the show, I've got the introduction or the beginning of my two parallel campaigns for the Temple of Elemental Evil, one using 5th edition D&D, another using Old School Essentials Advanced. I'll get to those in a little bit, but first let's get through some calls that have come in over the last couple of weeks.
Hey BJ, don't mind the music in the background. I just wanted to say it was fantastic to hear your recaps of your finale for the Storm Giant saga, and I'm glad you were able to play and hang out with us and contribute fantastically to the mini campaign for DCC, and I do hope we pick it up. I think it'd be kind of neat as you guys solve the puzzle, the three-body problem of Hommlet, and figure out where to go next. It'd be pretty cool. So thanks for being my gaming buddy. And one of these days we're going to have to hang out up there in Oklahoma, or if you ever come to San Antonio. But more likely I'll go up there and we'll hang out and do some fun stuff. Anyway, cheers, and thanks for those awesome Storm King's Thunder and DCC recaps.
Well, thank you for the compliments, Carl. Appreciate it. I always have a good time playing with you and hanging out with you guys, and either whether it's playing a role-playing game or doing the new Cerebrivore podcast where we just talk about stuff. But yeah, having a lot of fun with both DCC, and hopefully we'll get back into that. And also, hopefully I will get to enjoy this new 5e version of the Temple of Elemental Evil as much as we did the Storm King's Thunder. So, thanks again for the call.
Hey BJ, Daniel from Minutes Keep. Trying to catch back up again. Haven't listened to your kind of story of the ending of 2 campaigns, but I just wanted to kind of chime in on the maze thing. Yeah, I love the idea of using some kind of mechanic. Actually, a hex flower works really well for something like that, where where people are lost. They're supposed to be lost with the spell effect. That being said, I actually really like mapping, and I like my players to map, and sometimes it takes them a little while to get used to it, but once they can do it, I mean, my players generally can map pretty quickly, and it adds another dimension to a game. I mean, I have myself had many cases where I realized there was something going on because I was mapping. I think mapping is just another skill and another part of the game that can be fun. I think, like encumbrance, like so many things that people complain about, it's because when you first add it to the game, it seems complicated, but if you appreciate what it adds to the game, I think it can just be a really great part.
I guess I want to add that it's not necessarily the drawing of the map that can be fun. That's the fun part, I guess, as I'm saying. And although that can be fun, obviously, some people really love it, myself included. It's the feeling you get when you're a player when you have the map that you created and it helps you in the game. Or the feeling that you have as a player when the party is forced to flee and the DM is not giving you time to map. Oh, there's a corridor, left or right, and they make a bunch of decisions. Now it's 7 turns down the road. Did they remember which way they turned? And you might say, well, their characters would remember. No, I mean, that's to me, the part of what I like to call player skill. I know that some people don't agree with that, but I think that also adds another layer to it. It's another challenge for the players to see if they can manage to make their way back on their own. And I'm talking about non-magical stuff here, obviously. The magical stuff is pretty cool. I like the idea, like I said, of using a hex wall. And because I can't just leave 2 messages, I should also add that, of course, just like anything, nothing is always, right? I don't always ask my players to map. It's not always fun. It's not always not fun, right? I think it depends on the situation. If I'm running a one-shot or a 5-room dungeon or a place they don't necessarily plan on going back to, or a place where it would be unlikely that they'd be lost, right? Something that's pretty well structured, I don't bother with it. I only use the mapping when they're exploring dark dungeons, that are systems that seem like they could be lost, unexplored areas covered with cobwebs, possibly monsters around any corners, secret doors, that kind of stuff. That's when I want them to map. If it's some 5-room dungeon linear adventure that I'm running for a one-shot, I don't worry about that. I don't draw a map myself usually.
Thank you for those calls, Daniel. I am I'm in an interesting. COVID has been an interesting. Well, I shouldn't say make light of COVID. It's changed a lot of things in a lot of ways. Some in a very serious ways, with people getting sick and dying and losing income and things like that. But it's also just in little things that are kind of trivial, but nonetheless just change the way we live our everyday lives. I had gotten really. One of the YouTube channels I watch that I mentioned before is Dungeon Craft from Dan Masters, and one of the things he has presented on his, actually where I got the idea for how to run the Minotaur's Labyrinth maze kind of thing that kind of initiated the call, was what he calls doing more of a minimalist set piece battles where you're just using tiny pieces of terrain, scatter terrain, almost like you would set up a stage play where you don't have an entire set, so it looks like a movie, an entire map. You put a chair here and a door here and a column here, and in your mind's eye, everybody kind of imagines what the rest of the room looks like. So it just looks like again how you would use props on a stage with, again, kind of a minimalist way. And just setting up the room when it's time to set up the room, and not messing with laying out dungeon tiles or sketching out giant maps on a battle mat or anything like that. And I was really going to start doing that right as the pandemic sort of forced us to stop gaming together in person. So all my games for the last 2 years nearly have been solely virtual tabletop games online. Even with my local players that I was playing with locally, we did it online. But what I had wanted to do was use those for when we have a battle breakout on the table, and go back to just having people keeping a rough map as I describe what they're doing as they're going down hallways and looking in rooms where there's nothing in particular, empty rooms or rooms with just minimal features that don't really warrant turning to the miniatures and the terrain and things like that. And we've just never gotten back to it. I'm kind of curious, because I know you play in person, but you've also played online. How do you handle mapping with your games when you're playing with people online? Because I know when you're sitting around, even if you've got a designated mapper, everybody can look at their map and go, I think you made a mistake there. Or remind me again what that looks like, what that corridor was like that we passed by, and the mapper kind of shows they can pass the map around. Everybody can look at it and make comments. When you got people who are not in the room together, I'm kind of wondering how that would go to have one person map. I guess anyone with a map could always just share their document or hold it up in front of their webcam. But I'm kind of curious about your experience with that, how you've handled mapping with your virtual or your online games that you've ran or played in. So, but yeah, I think there is a cool element of the game with mapping. When you can do it where you've got a designated mapper, or maybe everybody's contributing to it. I remember back in the day, oftentimes I served as the mapper for the group. So I certainly enjoyed doing it. Although I think, sometimes there are a couple times where DM and I would get kind of frustrated because I always understand what he was saying. He was like, just give me the map, Although you're right, the player's mistakes are part of the player's skill. So I guess it kind of depends on from group to group how you do that. But anyway, thanks again for the calls, Daniel. And please let me know how you've handled mapping in the virtual world.
Hi, BJ. It's Joe Salvador. Hey, man. I had a great time speaking with you the other evening. Nice to meet you, finally. Hey, and I'm just listening to your session recap by the Horns, and there was some discussion about firing from behind smaller characters. And I kind of like what Jason is saying, but I think I would go a similar but different route. I feel like, I'm not an expert with OSE, so this might not apply, but I would say that if you are firing a bow from behind a person, that person gives you cover. So if you're hit by an enemy missile attack, then you're hit. But if you're missed, there would be a chance for that cover-granting character to take the attack. I'd have to figure that out, but just off the top of my head. All right, later.
Oh, thank you, Joe. Yeah, it was nice to meet you too. If you guys don't know who are listening, Joe's referring to there's an episode of Jason Connerly's Nerds RPG Variety Cast from earlier this week where he and Jason and Joe and I discuss the new movie The Northman. And it's a spoiler filled because we talk about The Northman and all the stuff and what was in it and how it compares to Viking sagas and things like that. So be sure and check that out if you have seen The Northman and want to hear us talk about it, or if you don't mind hearing a bunch of spoilers about it. Either way, that's available. It's one of Jason's more recent things. I'll put a link in the show description so you can find it. It's here on Anchor. It should be pretty easy to find if you're familiar with the Anchor podcast, but I'll put the link just in case. So yeah, there in core OSE, because it's just BXD&E, there's really no specific rule about firing into melee or firing past somebody. And so what I have always said is if you've got a clear line of sight, unobscured line of sight, you can just shoot at somebody, no problem. Just looking at them, laid out on the battle map. There's an option in old school advanced rules if you add them in to kind of incorporate the AD&D rule of, if there's any kind of melee going on, you don't have a clear line of sight, even if the guy you want to shoot is like 5 squares on the grid in front of you and there's nobody in it. The guy next to him who's trying to engage in melee, they're technically moving back and forth into each other's space. So there's a chance that you could hit that other person by mistake. We haven't encountered that situation since I started using the old school advanced rules as far as firing directly into melee. Now, as far as just if people are kind of spread out and not really in melee, I think I would probably just go with a human or an elf sized person is tall enough to shoot over the head of a dwarf, halfling, or gnome sized person. If they're not in melee. Now, if they get in melee, I may be more tempted to do that. Yeah, you got a chance of hit, but it may be a less of a chance to hit. Maybe a dwarf or a halfling only has half the chance of getting hit by friendly fire or incidental fire that a human or an elf or an orc or somebody like that might. So, haven't really had a chance to have to really incorporate those rules yet, and even I think the rules for AD&D even say, the DM just needs to determine a way to the chances of each and then roll a die for it. But I think there's a number of ways you can do it. And it goes pretty quick once you're used to it, just doing that. I mean, I think it's like any kind of procedural rule in D&D. You can look at them all written out and you go, wow, this game is really complicated. Whether you're talking about AD&D or 3rd edition or 5th edition or what Pathfinder or whatever. But once everybody's familiar with the rules, they go really smoothly. So, I will probably, my gut tells me I'll stick with if it's not melee, then a tall person can shoot over a short person. If it's in melee, we'll come up with some sort of chance of friendly fire based on how many people are involved and the relative sizes of each person. Just to try to keep it simple, but also have it be it's not just a gimme that you can just shoot at will without any risk of anything else. But thanks for the call, Joe. It's always good to hear from you. It was kind of nice to get to meet you face to face, even if it was kind of online face to face. But I guess that's how a lot of us are finally starting to meet each other, is more through Zoom calls and video chat as opposed to in person. So, you guys, if you're not familiar, Joe is from Raven God Games. He's got some really good products out there, so be sure and check them out. He's got some great stuff out there. And that'll do it for the calls. I want to thank again my callers, Carl Rodriguez of the GMologist Presents, Daniel Norton of Bandits Keep, and Joe Salvador of Raven God Games. Be sure and check out the stuff those guys are doing. A lot of great stuff, as I said before. So now we will turn to this weird situation I'm in where I'm running the same campaign with 2 different groups in 2 different editions of the game. But first, here's a word from our sponsor.
We've all heard the solo podcasts, we know the names of the legendary anchorites, but now the Hydra of Discord, the polyphony of podcasting quarrels, joined together into a single podcast, Cerebrivore, a bi-weekly show where a rotating cast of podcasters discuss a variety of tabletop role-playing topics. Cerebrivore, it'll devour your mind.
So yeah, be sure and check out the Cerebrivore podcast. It is a second podcast that I'm a part of. I'm just a panelist on it. It's mostly coordinated by Jason Connerly, but I've been on most of the episodes so far, along with a lot of the voices that are familiar as callers here, other anchor podcasters, Carl Rodriguez, Joe Richter, and Arlen Walker. So yeah, check out Cerebrivore again. I'll put a link in the show description here for that podcast as well. Okay, on to the next stuff. This is going to be kind of an interesting way of summarizing two concurrent campaigns that are the same campaign with two different groups. So I'm going to try to paste these updates so that I don't spoil anything, because I have players in both groups who listen to the podcast. So I don't want to spoil one thing that one group may have uncovered or done before the other group has. So we'll see if this works. But let's at least describe our two. Let's start off with the two parties that I've got. So the first group for my 5th edition campaign, this is our new campaign now that we've finished Temple of Elemental Evil. There are 5 players in this game. So the 5 characters I have right now, these are first level 5th edition characters. Arbin, who is a halfling bard. Majil, who is an elf wizard. Kane, a human thief. Roland, a human monk. And Trick, who is a gnome artificer. And so I don't think any of them have really gotten to the point where they're going to pick their archetypes yet. I believe that Roland the Monk, this player, stated he wants to pursue the path of the Kinsai when he makes his choice. I'm not sure where the other ones are going. I know as soon as Majil levels up, he'll choose his arcane school. And then the other 3, I think they've got a little time to decide what version of their characters they want to be. So those are the 5 characters in that party. Along the way, they have picked up an NPC that is functioning as a hireling, and that is one of the locals from Hommlet, a female fighter. Licia, who is one of the local NPCs you can run into depending on which farms and businesses you visit. And Trick has also purchased a mastiff that he wants to train as a riding animal. It's already kind of trained as a hunting mastiff, so he's going to also train him to ride him and put a saddle on him, since he's a gnome and he's small enough to ride him into battle. So that's the party that we have for 5th edition. For my old school Essentials game, our party consists of Dude, who is a half-elf, multi-classed cleric warden, and he is a cleric of Obadai, the god of nature, for Greyhawk. A warden is a specialized class they have in Old School Essentials Advanced that was published in one of the Carcass Crawler zines, and it is more or less a ranger without the magic spells, and because it doesn't have the magic spells, it uses the fighter's experience progression. So the warden is sort of a halfway between a fighter and a ranger, and he's a multi-class cleric warden half-elf. He's played by Carl Rodriguez, who hosts the GMologist Presents podcast. We have Retlaw, who is played by Jason Connerly of the Nerds RPG Variety Casts. He is a barbarian, and he is a half-ogre. And again, we used, from the Carcass Crawler zines for Old School Essentials, they have an ancestry called Gargantua that's sort of their stand-in, I believe. I think the intention was for it to stand in for a Goliath, but since we're trying to play a little more classic Greyhawk here, we called it a half ogre. And so he's a half ogre barbarian. We have Ruvan, who is an elf, straight up BX elf. So he's a fighter magic user blend, but just using the elf class. That's played by Arlen Walker of Live from Pelham's Wasteland. And then Zamfir, who's played by another guy who's playing with us who doesn't have a podcast. And Zamfir is a human bard. And this is an old school AD&D style bard, so it's not the roguish, rakish, oversexed arcane bard that we've come to expect in D&D. This is more a bard in the tradition of druidic culture, so they use druid spells, and they have a wide, lore and druidic magic and nature is still sort of the theme of this kind of the historical bard. Well, probably not the historical bard, but a little closer to the historical bard as we understand it. They also, along the way, picked up 2 companions, a wizard named Spugnor that they met in the inn, and also a fighter named Zira who unfortunately died in their first outing. So, but prior to either of these parties picking up these hirelings or these retainers or these sort of locals or people in town that they're going along with them, it was just the player characters that entered in during the first encounter. So it's gone very well. I started the 5th edition people at first level, and I've adopted some more specified. They're not super house rules. They're optional rules from the DMG, and a couple of tweaks that I'm trying to give us a little more, a little more deadliness. I don't know if deadly is the right word, just to make it a little more. Yeah, a little more deadly, a little more dangerous, to make them where they have to manage their resources and they're not quite as tough. And they have felt that. I mean, they've had 2 of the characters have come very close to dying so far. They haven't lost anybody yet, but 2 of the 5e player characters at first level have in the combats they've been in really come close to dying. Dropped below 0 and were rolling death saves, and one of them got very close and failed 2 death saves, but then was able to be stabilized. So actually, come to think of it, 3 of them have done that, because in the first encounter, I think 2 people went down at one point. So I think those rules are kind of working to kind of, this is a group of people. We've got a couple of players who are more kind of younger, new school players, but some of the guys who are in the group are kind of old school that go back to the AD&D days and have said they would. They like 5th edition, but they would really prefer it to have more of that old, the more sense of danger that we had back in the day. So I adopted these rules to do that, and I'll go over those in a minute. But those are our 2 parties that we're working with. For the old school essentials, I kind of worried that they were a little tough, because I have a direct 5e conversion for Temple of Elemental Evil from Goodman Games. You guys should check it out. It's a 2-volume set. It's pretty pricey, but it's really well done. And so I wasn't worried about that, but I was a little bit worried about taking BX-style characters and putting them in an AD&D module without any kind of tweaks. And so I went ahead and gave them all a certain amount of XP that ensured that they were all at second. Basically, they're all starting at 2nd level, but because of the different XP tables for each class, Zamfir the Bard wound up being 3rd level. But they've been maybe a little more resilient than the 5e party in retrospect. But I think it'll even out, because they're going to level up slower as they face more and more challenges. And so, and again, this is kind of an experiment for me of taking an AD&D module and running it with old school essentials. So we're taking BX characters and putting them through an AD&D module. And it worked. It was pretty easy to convert so far. But I was worried they might be just a little too soft, because they're going dead at 0 instead of having the negative hit points at AD&D. So I wanted to give them a little bit of a chance to get their feet wet before it starts. And they have not gotten into the number of combats that the 5e group has either. So that's probably also why they've survived a little better. Anyway, those are the 2 parties for Temple of Elemental Evil, my old school essentials party, and my 5e party for the 2 games I'm running. And so that's kind of who they are. and now maybe we'll give a little comparison as to how things have gone. So before we go any farther, let me just go through the supplemental rules I put together for my 5th edition group. I had them roll their 46 drop lowest for their ability scores and assign them as desired. But I'm using a version of Tasha's Cauldron and everything came up with a way of customizing your background, and D&D 5e is moving away from the fixed attributes based bonuses, ability bonuses based specifically on ancestry. So I just said that you're going to gain ability scores from your race. Just once you've set your base scores, you can either increase one by 2 and another by 1, or 3 of them by 1 as you see fit. What that does is basically takes the pressure off people to min-max and to pick an ancestry because of what benefits the class they want to play, and just says, pick that because you're interested in the flavor of that ancestry or the role-playing opportunities of that ancestry, not because it just works better for the class you want to play. And so that was the thing we got. And then for humans, I allowed humans as kind of as a reflection of that to do. It's sort of like the variant human in 5e, that they get a proficiency in one skill or tool of their choice and one type of saving throw of their choice. So it's almost like taking the resilient feat for by default. So that's what that works out to. We're going to do max hit points at first level, but they have to roll afterwards. So we're not going to do the option of taking half your hit die at every level. You're going to roll your hit die after first level. I'm going to use the slow natural healing rule from the DMG that says after a long rest, they don't regain hit points. They can only regain hit points by spending hit dice during a rest. And that after the rest, they can regain a number of hit dice up to half their total hit dice. So before they rest, they can spend hit dice to get their hit points back, and then rest and get hit dice, long rest and get hit dice back. But they don't just get all their hit points back for taking a long rest. I have added an option called an extended rest, which is 24 hours. An extended rest has to take place in a safe place, like in somebody's home, a stronghold, an inn, someplace where they're pretty much safe. There's not going to be any wandering monster encounters or things like that. And in that case, they can, at 24 hours of an extended rest, doing nothing in town, lets them regain all hit points and all hit dice. So it's truly taking yourself out of the adventuring day in order to do that in a safe place. I never have been able to get people to use inspiration the way it's designed in 5e, so I'm borrowing a little of a book from Pathfinder 2e, and that everybody starts with 1 point of inspiration of the day. They can earn additional inspiration through the day by doing things creative or interesting, or overcoming a particularly difficult challenge. Max out at 3 inspiration, and it resets to 1 after they take a long rest. Inspiration can be used to re-roll an attack, saving throw, or ability check. It can be used to negate disadvantage on an attack roll, saving throw, or ability check, or it can be used to force an enemy to re-roll an attack. You can't make an enemy re-roll a save or anything else, but if they're directly attacking you, you can force them to re-roll. We're doing a combat instead of we've been re-rolling initiative every combat round. The effects that start like one of the reasons I've avoided ever trying this option is because 5e is built on a lot of your spells and abilities sort of are supposed to last a full turn, because everybody goes in the same order every time. So it's what that happens is if it says, well, it ends on the spellcaster's turn, and then the spellcaster rolls really well on their initiative, the next time it takes that out of play. But because we're using Fantasy Grounds, I don't know if this is a feature or a bug, but Fantasy Grounds tracks those effects by initiative, the initiative count they were started on, not on the character that does it. So your initiative can change in Fantasy Grounds, and those effects are still going to be tracked as though they're queuing off that initiative count when they were first put into place. So that allows us very easily to re-roll initiative every round. I think I forgot to do that in our last combat for our most recent session. But we did it in all the other ones, and it worked pretty well. I am doing the there's a -2 attack roll when you fire into combat. They're supposed to have cover, which gives +2 AC, but to make it easier on the players to track, I just am saying take 2 off your attack roll instead of me trying to change people's AC. If you miss the target, then the attack would have hit them. Otherwise, you instead apply that to one of their melee opponents, so you can potentially get hit by friendly fire by a attack rank. When you're reduced to 0 hit points, you can't benefit from any kind of healing until you get stabilized. So there's an added challenge to getting someone stable once they go to 0 before you can actually apply a potion or a healing spell or anything like that. And also, once you're reduced to 0 hit points and stabilized and come back up, you have a level of exhaustion. So I've added a flanking rule back because people enjoy that. But instead of using the advantage, which is suggested in the DMG, because that is such a huge benefit, I'm just doing a +1 bonus to attack rolls when 2 allies flank. And also, when you're actively flanking, you can't use the help action, because help can grant your friend advantage. So you can either help and grant them advantage, or you can flank and just take the +1 bonus for yourself, and they only get a +1 from their side. And those are most of the house rules I'm using. And so that's how we're doing things. For anybody familiar with 5e, those are some of the additional things that we are doing. The setup for this campaign, and if you've listened to some of my previous episodes, you know I will kind of rewrite some of the story and insert my own slant on things. So here's what's happening with this campaign and kind of the adventure hook. And the idea is that Hommlet has been sort of this peaceful country farming vision down in the hills in the Viz County of Verbobank, which is not in. That's how the village of Hommlet always starts out, and they're having an increased problem with bandits. And so in both campaigns, the players are kind of fledgling adventurers, and they're in the city of Verbobank prior to the play starting, and they're hit by a recruiter who tells them, "Hey, we're recruiting all kinds of people. The Viscount has appointed this magic user named Byrne as the Lord Protector of Hommlet, and they're building up a fort to help protect the village because it's an important crossroads and an important farming community to deal with the bandits. And so they're recruiting laborers to help build the castle. They're recruiting just sort of general mercenaries and soldier types to serve as part of the guard, and also adventuring types for kind of to be on retainer as special, for special tasks and the things that adventurers are good at doing, as opposed to your just routine militiamen and guardsmen. So that's why that's the hook, is they've responded to a thing to go to the village of Hommlet and meet with Byrne, the archmage of Hommlet, about going into his service potentially to earn some money, and that's how they get there. I just started both of them kind of in the middle of, you're on the road, you hear somebody calling from help, roll for initiative. And so in both cases, they had a successful encounter with what's happening. Is there is a man, help me, I've been stabbed, and a guy's laying in the road. But as they approach, they get ambushed by 4 bandits. The 5e group, 2 of them actually went down throughout the course of the battle. One of them got very close to dying, but they did manage to defeat all the bandits. The 5e group, I think were wounded, the OSE group, I think, took some wounds, but pretty much defeated the bandits. And one thing that helped them was the morale mechanic for Old School Essentials. So there was a neat comparison of the way morale becomes an automatic. There's a mechanic for checking for morale and some guidance to do it the first time one of them kills or if their leader gets killed. And that helped cause some of the bandits there to break and flee. But both of them did manage to kill some bandits and take evidence, the 5E group in the form of the bandits' ears and the OSE group in the form of the bandits' heads, and claim some rewards in town for having fought bandits, at which point they're informed that's really close to town. I mean, they were within sight of town. And so there's a sort of an interesting problem there that they've been... their bandits are getting more bold and more aggressive in their activity around Hommlet. Throughout the couple of days that both parties have spent in town, they've both managed to, for various reasons, visit. There's a temple of St. Cuthbert, and they've met Brother Calmert, who is the acolyte there, who has treated some wounds for both of them, and also saw to the proper burial of one of the OSC's group's retainers that got killed during their first outing to the ruins in nearby town. They've both managed to meet the druid who lives in a grove on the other side of town from the temple, Jaru Askstaff, who is one of the Hommlet NPCs who's a druid. Because the party in the OSE game consists of a cleric of Obadiah and a barbarian and a bard, they're all very inclined to kind of connect to the druid because they share a common... They're all members of the old faith, which in Greyhawk is the religion of druids and of the nature gods and things like that. So the 5e party, it was only Majil, the elf, who visited the druid, while the other people were securing a room at the inn, and did not really want to have anything to do with the temple of St. Cuthbert. The player who's playing Majil is going to play him is a little bit thinking kind of high of himself, and humans are very... he doesn't have a very high opinion of humans. So he's just kind of adventuring with these people out of convenience or whatnot. They both chose to stay at the inn as opposed to being barracked with Byrne and his soldiers. So they met the innkeeper. What is the name of the innkeeper? Ostergundegut, is that his name in the village of Hommlet? I have a list of all the NPCs here, if I can look at it. Yeah, Ostergundegut. And, his family owns the inn, and he kind of cued him in as to the kind of the state of things in town, as you have these old families who are, the farmers, some newer people who have moved in, who are mostly kind of the merchant class and some of the artisans. All of the old established families are mostly of the old faith, although some have converted to the worship of St. Cuthbert. Most of the newer people are St. Cuthbert adherents, but they all get along. They all get along with each other. There's the advice is basically says we probably don't want to talk about religion over dinner, but everybody still, it's a tight-knit community where everybody knows each other and takes care of each other and helps each other throughout, and they don't really faction up along religious divides. What they've also learned is that the Hommlet has its own militia. All able-bodied adults are members of the militia, and they've pretty much taken care of themselves for generations. And so they're not particularly happy about all of a sudden the Viscount deciding that they need a professional, that they need a Lord Protector with standing soldiers to protect the town. They feel like they've always done it themselves. They'll be able to keep doing it. So they are a little resentful of that. Although they like Byrne, because Byrne is a retired adventurer who's actually lived there for a few years, and so they all know him, and he's a friend of a lot of the town leaders. So the fact that the Viscount has appointed someone that they like is probably made it palatable, whereas if he just sent in some stranger from out of town, they would not have enjoyed that. They would have been pretty resistant to that idea. So there's some divisions in town, nothing that can spill over, but something that might be worth keeping an eye They've then of course they've met. They have not actually met Burn yet. Burn the most worshipful mage of Hommlet, who's a retired mage. They have met Sir Rufus, who is Burn's a former adventuring partner of Burn, who's a fighter. He's been knighted by the Viscount, and he is right now serving as the commander of Burn's troops, who are called Burn's Badgers, and they're actually mercenaries, and some of them are kind of reformed, people that have encountered Burn and Rufus in their earlier days and been given a second chance to get on the straight and narrow and do something productive instead of being thieves and brigands and all the like. So I think that's sort of the common theme of who all they've encountered, as well as having gone to the trading post. There's a trading post there. That was a lot of fun to role play. Ranos and Grimag, the two merchants, every time they go in, they meet Ranos, who's this kind of short, stocky, placid. He's very slow. I role play him with the slow voice, and we buy something, and that'll be 5 gold. Let's see, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And so I role play him with this, just dragging things out. That's a lot of fun to role play him. And then Grimag, who is his business partner, occasionally will come out and push him out of the way because he's impatient, and he's tall and thin and fussy and disagreeable, and just wants to pay and get people out, and he won't haggle, and he's kind of snarky and but also very efficient, and he just wants, look, get your stuff, pay, and get out. That's kind of his attitude. So being able to contrast the two of them, and they've kind of chatted also with Verald, who is a fighter who Ramos and Grimag kind of have on premises sort of security, since they're a trading post. They got a lot of goods and horses and money laying around. So both parties have picked up on the impression that these guys are they will try to screw you over. They sell high and buy low, but hey, that's the only game in town for adventuring gear. So they've had to deal with them for some stuff already. And then also the night they stayed in the inn, everybody got to meet Elmo, who is a local farm boy and appears to be the town drunk. And he goes on a drunken, both cases got to kind of go on a drunken, walking around, sloppy, slurring his speech, talking to everybody, laughing, giggling. Both parties have a bard, so both times he's kind of drunkenly requesting a ballad, and then he starts crying and talking about, he loves that cry. His mom used to sing him that when he went to sleep, and he loves his mother, and he loves his dad, and he loves his brother who's gone off to be an adventurer, and he misses his brother, and his brother told him to take care of mom and dad because they're getting up there in years. So we had some fun role playing with Elmo, and if you've played through the Temple of Elemental Evil in any of its incarnations in the past, Elmo is I think a favorite NPC of a lot of people. I've resisted the urge to have him talk like Elmo from Sesame Street. So that is how Hommlet has shaped up. They have both ventured forth. There's a ruin near Hommlet they both take interest in as they hear more about it. Supposedly this ruin was, when people are talking about Hommlet, we don't think we need a Lord Protector. We haven't had one in a long time. The last one, didn't even take care of his castle. It's a ruin out in the swamp. And they're, adventurers like, oh, ruins? So with the leave of Sir Rufus, both of them have gone to the ruins to investigate what's going on out there. Maybe that's a bandit hideout. Who knows? Both of them had to fight some giant frogs as they approached the bridge over the moat that surrounds this ruined manor. And that is where the Old School Essentials party lost to one of their retainers, to the giant frog. The 5e party survived it. They got beat up a little bit, but they managed to survive it. I think Kane was almost swallowed by a giant frog, but managed to get out of there before it ate him. So they both I think after the frogs, the 5e party carried on. Again, the OSC party went back to town to see to the remains of their lost retainer and then returned the next day. This is where they diverge, so this is where we'll stop, and after we've played another session or two of each of them, I'll come back with some of the commonalities of other things they've done. One thing they have both discovered in skirmishes with bandits is that the bandits are carrying somewhere on their person, all of them, a smoothed stone. It's probably, for our purposes and in real world purposes, maybe it's a smooth river stone, maybe about the size of a silver dollar in how round it is. And it's been etched with an eye that has a teardrop trickling down from it. So it's got this crying eye, and they don't know what to make it other than that all the bandits are carrying this stone on their person. It seems to be some common thing that they're not displaying any of these symbols openly, but they have these stones in them. So that's kind of the mystery they're trying to work on. Is that just a gang? Some badge that says you're a part of this gang, or does it mean something else? And so that's where they're going to be picking up on as both groups continue to explore the ruined moat house, out in the swamps near the village of Hommlet. So I'll provide more recaps when there's stuff to talk about. Okay, that's it for this episode. Thanks for listening. I want to thank my callers for calling in, and I'll be back with another episode in the near future. Thanks for listening to the Arcane Alienist podcast. The music you're hearing is Come and Get It by Scott Holmes Music. The cover art I use for the episodes is by Dave Bone. Be sure and check out his website, ironseer.com, for a lot of other great gaming-related content. You can always leave me a voice message through the Anchor app or at the Anchor website, or you can email me at arcane.alienist@gmail.com. Once again, I appreciate you listening. Thanks so much.